Okay, is this working? Can people hear me? See if that's working. All right, I think this should be working. All right, hopefully this is working and people can hear and stuff. So this week I'm actually here solo. We seem to keep running out of co-hosts. I don't know if they're all leaving the game or something, but we'll do the best we can. Um, so I thought I'd maybe, at least just to kind of keep the card ratings going, try to do a short stream. But I think then what I'm going to try to do, now that I finally have the computer set up and stuff, is I'm going to try to see if we can get back to some of the baseball sim stuff. Hopefully by next week. So hopefully that's the plan. But for this week, let me see if I can get that working. Hold on. Wrong setup on the card ratings. One of these times is going to work on the first try, right? Not today, but one of these times I swear this is going to work on the first try. Okay, I think that should be working, right? Except I have to. All right, I think that will now work for the card list. All right, I think we actually have something working. Good. So, all right, hopefully that's a plan. Hopefully people can hear. And I have to refresh. All right, I think we got the tech stuff worked out. Maybe? Or maybe not. Why is this not showing the way it's supposed to? All right, I'm going to assume it's working. It looks like it's going through. Okay, I think this should be working now. All right, sorry about the confusion. So yeah, I think we can try to kind of quickly go through some of the cards that came out this week. See sort of what things look like. Happy to go through any other questions that come up. Let's see. I'm trying to think what news there is this week. Maybe not a whole lot of news, right? Other than the card release. So I guess it's 70s week in the league. So that means kind of all of these league settings and so forth should be based in the 1970s. I guess I haven't made a lot of changes because I haven't been thinking much about the league, but one of the kind of changes we'd expect to see. So I bet if I look at the pitching staff, I'll see that they're kind of going a lot deeper into games. Let's see, what is this? 29. Okay, 29 starts, 232 innings. Yeah, so he is going a bit deeper, right? No, quite a bit deeper. No, that's 8 innings per start. Yeah, so we are basically seeing starters go quite a bit deeper into the game, which you'd expect for the 70s. I probably don't actually need to put this many arms in the bullpen. So, probably I could optimize that a bit better. So maybe that's one kind of change. I don't know if you're seeing other significant changes in your leagues. The 70s aren't really different enough from modern to make as big of a difference in the gameplay as we might have thought, and then we can combine that with the game engine kind of doing its normalization. And it's probably just not as big of a difference as one might have anticipated. So let's see. What else going on this week? That's probably a lot of it, right? We've still got another week and a half, I guess, for PTCS qualification. So, still another week past this. I guess one thing I'm definitely noticing is we're seeing a lot more dailies and stuff start to creep into quick. So, for example, Actually, I should draft this. But I found that there was actually, for example, even a daily perfect draft in Quicks right now, which probably we should go ahead and draft, just because this will definitely fire at some point on stream. So maybe that's a good one to start out. Yeah, if there are other questions and stuff, happy to take them, and otherwise I'll kind of just try to go through the cards as quickly as possible. Given that it takes a little longer without a co-host. So, yeah. So hopefully that's the plan. Let's see. All right, I know. Why don't we go through? So what is this? It's 1966. It's a rocking chair draft. So I guess this is a draft where there's going to be a dominant strategy, because kind of the way I'd look at this is it's 1966. That means almost all of the pitching's really going to be done by your 5-man rotation. You can get away with really no more than probably 2 or 3 arms in the pen actually throwing very many innings. So what that means is we're going to have 5 or 6 players on the roster potentially that really aren't going to see much time at all. And so the way we're going to want to hide our lives, as much as possible, we're just going to want to hide our lives as kind of the back of the bullpen. So from that point of view, it's a little weird kind of making this a rocking chair format, because it kind of ruins the idea of wanting to mix in the lives with the historicals. But at the same time, there does seem to be a dominant strategy, so let's just kind of see what we can do here. So we're probably then going to have a little bit of a bias in these early rounds, still maybe towards realizing that the live pitching is probably closer to the historical pitching than the live hitting is to the historical hitting at similar tiers. So maybe where equal, we're going to have a little bit of a bias also towards bats. And in this case, it's pretty easy. Eddie Matthews is just kind of the best bat we've got available. Similarly, here, again, the gap between, sort of one of the even decent, like a Henderson or something like that, this is a pretty good live bat. But the gap between this and the bats that you'd get in Diamond at the historical level is probably bigger than the gap between a lot of the starters. Now, in Modern, I'm not sure we'd be so happy with Gilbert here, just because the home run prevention really isn't what we want, even kind of given that we have this bias toward pitching. In 1966, probably it's going to be about okay. So this probably just gets to be one of our starters. It's a good place to hide a live card. And kind of that's the name of the game here, is you have to take 12 live cards, and you want to just hide them as well as possible. Okay. So here, again, there is a bias toward hitting. So I think Kaline would have been pretty sensible. He is much better one way than the other. It's also kind of a mission card from right around release. So probably it's going to make more sense for us here to take Wainwright, just on the basis that, look, he is going to throw almost a fifth of our innings. So even if we had this sort of bias toward hitters, the game plan, you still need to pick the best player available most of the time, even if that was the game plan. So, okay, let's see. So what do we have in the way of pitchers here? Let's start with that. Do we have anybody that we're actually happy to just put in our rotation? Well, Miley looks okay for 66. Knack, a little bit less so, maybe. Waka, kind of borderline. Okay, so I think we definitely want Miley. And then really it's a question of, is there another, is there another card here that either we think we can actually get some use out of, or do we just start, picking cards to hide? So we're certainly willing to take one high leverage bullpen arm if we have a good one here as well. Not seeing a ton. Okay, we could take a backup catcher. It's probably not a great 1966 catcher. So probably it's one of the arms anyway. Actually, this is not a horrible 1966 bat, so maybe we just do this as a backup. Yeah, maybe that makes the most sense. And again, I'm trying to kind of do this in a way that's a little bit illustrative, so please feel free to, ask questions or something if there's something that you want to know, either what I'm thinking or if you think I should be doing something different. All right, well, this is an interesting round. So we've got 4 cards, any of which I think we would have been reasonably happy to take in a gold round here. So we've got Rogers. This is, kind of a recent release strong pitcher in a format where your pitchers are going to, potentially throw a lot of complete games. The biggest flaw with the card is the stamina, and that just doesn't hurt him in 1966. And, he's even a lefty that can face righties. So we're very happy to grab that card. Okay. Then you've got Ozzy. This is just an excellent card. We're very happy to just run him at short and not think about it. Then we have Bankhead, this recent mission reward, who defensively can run almost anywhere and has a bat where the single flaw in the bat's power, which isn't as important in 1966. And then finally, Kingman is just sort of a power bat, but is a pretty good one. And the avoid Ks are again not going to hurt him as much in 66. So really all 4 of those are cards we'd be pretty happy with. But what we're going to do, I think, we still have this bias toward hitters because it's easier to find the pitchers. So probably we want to just put Ozzy at short. We want to put Bankhead, any of a bunch of places, and that leaves us some flexibility for later. All right, so now again, live round. I think we're going to be pretty happy if we can just find, maybe a couple arms here, unless we just happen to find something. Because, like, for example, Stanton, this is a perfectly fine live bat, but this is just really pretty far behind all the historical bats we were just looking at, and the historical bats we're likely to get when we're looking at silver rounds. So it's just not worth thinking about this is a bat if we can find a card to hide instead. Let's see. So can we find a starter here? Probably not. Let's see. Fernandez is fine. Morejon's probably kind of playable. Makes us a little lefty heavier. Hudson, probably not. Yes, even 66, the home run prevention is going to hurt him. So, yeah, maybe we're just going to end up with a couple of relievers. Oh, actually, Cronin looks much better even. Yeah, so we'll end up with a couple of relievers. Not a great round, but this is going to be fine. And again, we don't need more than a couple of relievers, and we're going to be able to hide some of the other lives later on. All right, so now again, we're back to sort of a little bit of a bias for hitters. So we're definitely going to take Murphy, even if some of the things he does, the power plays down a little bit, but then the avoid Ks actually, also play down a bit. So we're still pretty happy to get Murphy probably. And then, okay, so Kieschnick's is probably one of the newer cards, but just isn't that strong. Adolfo Phillips. This is a really good profile because the avoid Ks don't hurt him as much. So probably we're going to then, let's just run Phillips in center. Murphy then can play left. And we still don't know where we're going to put Bankhead. He might even end up being in right, depending on the way we fill out the roster. Let's see. All right, well, Waldron at least kind of is an okay profile. We would like to do a little bit better, but it's the only starter here. And we were hoping to probably find at least 2 more in the silver rounds. So what else do we have here? Yarbrough, it's a really P. Babbitt heavy profile. Yeah, Stevenson probably the same thing. All right, so yeah, Liberatore. Okay, so then that's probably the two we're looking at. Another option, if we liked one of the catchers, backup catcher is an easy place to hide one, and this might even end up being our starting catcher. So, we'll kind of see how that goes. All right, so as much as we had a little bit of a bias against the historical starters, here DeGrom's just a pretty good pick. We do need two more starters. He's still a decent get for the silver round in terms of where we're at. Here I can put the profile up. Yeah, and then probably always take Henry Davis, who might catch for us, and he might go elsewhere, but we're fine if he catches for us in the 60s. So that should work reasonably well. Yeah, I think that should be fine. Still need a starter. Actually, Feltner's not bad for a bronze option. Rom was good before the re-rate. The re-rate hurt him a little bit, but he's probably somebody we're still happy with. And again, he's not really being hurt by the stamina. Now the problem is we only have one catcher left after this. So probably we're supposed to take one of the starters in Jeffers, would be my guess. Yeah, I guess that just feels like it's safer. I wish I had just a little more homer prevention. Yeah, so okay, so something like that probably. All right, and let's see, we still need a couple just position players that are going to start for us. And we're not getting a ton. This Bernie Allen with a funny profile, it probably does make sense to pick him up. He might end up being our second baseman if Bankhead's in right. Buckner, this bat isn't going to play well in 66. We actually still don't have a first baseman, I guess. Right? Davis doesn't play first. Matthews, this version doesn't play first. I mean, Bankhead doesn't even play first. I guess Lau could be a first baseman. All right, and then I guess if there isn't a second good option, maybe we just pick up Glass because he probably actually does end up slotting in as one of our 5 starters. Okay, so we have plenty of relievers, so we're certainly happy to just take position players. Still actually really need a first baseman. Okay, Carpenter's is just not a bad live bat. Who else? Maybe sometimes has a good shape, but doesn't look like he does in this re-rate. It's our other best live bat. Yeah, probably in the 60s where the power doesn't hurt him as much. Maybe just do that. And, really we're sort of hoping that we get a bit of luck and get one more bat in this last round, which we really didn't. I mean, we'll take Dietrich, but that's not a great 66 bat. Well, actually, I guess this is pretty simple. We're kind of taking the 5 position players, or 5 of the 6. And Simon's bat's so bad. Maybe we just want another second baseman. Yeah. All right. Okay. So hopefully that was at least a little bit helpful in terms of thinking about how to do one of these rocking chairs. And again, this is actually in Quicks, so you can sign up and kind of take your shots and PTCS points with no delay if you want them. That's true. Bankhead also pitches a little bit. Is he actually? It's close actually whether Bankhead even should be one of the starters. But I think glass definitely will be. So, probably it looks something like this. Wait, hold on. Yeah. And of course, having ended up with Wainwright's a big problem, but there just wasn't a lot else that round. So at least we have a good version of what we have. Let's see what they've got us doing here. Okay. So actually, this isn't awful for kind of the auto set. So okay, so they want Bankhead and left. Let's think a little bit about that. So I guess Bankhead could play left, and then Murphy, but Murphy's actually fine defensively. So that I mean, if we're gonna have this arrangement, we'd rather put Bankhead in right. Yeah, and I guess actually that makes sense. That's kind of getting everybody in the lineup roughly the way we want them. Yeah, we ended up sort of one bat short of really what we would have liked. So this is probably fine though, and I'll just let it set the lineup. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time optimizing it just so we can get on the cards. Yeah, Bankhead I think had. Oh, Bankhead does he have no stamina? That's a good point. Let me go back and check. He might have no stamina. I forgot to check that. Yeah, let's go back and take a look. Bankhead. Yeah, oh yeah, you're right. He only has 7 stamina. Okay, so he couldn't have been a starter then. Good point. Although I guess there are a few tricks you can play to sometimes because like if you find a way to make him a starter, he is actually you are going to get 18 batters faced out of him. He just will kind of hit 0 stamina, which has other problems. But sometimes it's worth paying these penalties. So like for example, yeah, I can show you this. I discovered just playing around with it that actually Cecil Fielder is a much better catcher than you might have thought. So I ended up running Cecil. Uh, I ended up running Cecil primarily at catcher in this tournament, and he actually did fine, given that he brings his bat, and you're getting one extra bat in the lineup just putting him behind the plate. Uh, so minus one framing run in 8 games is not great, but I think his bat's probably more than making up for it. So you can play around with stuff like that. Anyway, why don't we take a look at some cards then? And again, it's a little tricky with no co-host, but I guess I'll just try to get through them sort of as quickly as possible. Um, yeah, I can sign up for. Well, I'll sign up for something to run at the end of the night maybe. But let's get on to cards, I guess. Unless there are any other things that people want to discuss before we get on to cards. Yeah, exactly, and Ryan, it's I mean, it's a small sample size. I'm sure the answer isn't a large sample size. He's not a great defensive catcher, but it turns out that actually putting non-catchers behind the dish doesn't work as poorly as you might think in terms of the way the game, figures out what to do with them. So, all right, let's take a look at some cards. What do we got here? And this is good because I have not fully looked at these, so it'll kind of be a good chance to go through. I'll be looking at some of them for the first time as well. But let's start, I guess, with Tom Buskey, right? So what do we got here? We've got a reliever. I guess, let's see, tiny splits. You do have the 22 stamina, so potentially multi-inning guy. I guess the issue is he just looks like he's going to probably be a bit understated. Well, he's certainly going to be a bit understated for iron. So maybe the question is really, are you interested in this as some kind of cap card? Because otherwise he's just pretty understated. But the problem is, I think even if you compare this to lives that are 43, like here's a live that's 43. That's probably getting you. So he is getting you a little bit more control. Yeah, he's getting you a little more control, but then they're also. Okay, so I guess with that control, yeah, it's definitely not going to work modern. Even at 43, there are just sort of too many other options. So let's say I were to run this card in an earlier era. We still need a bullpen, so let's say we run it, somewhere around 1970, I guess, where the control is going to help a bit. Because if you go to too early of an era, now you're just running your starters probably. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing at the back end of the bullpen. All right. Well, no, even there, I've got him just as too understat. It looks like. Just trying to see if there's a card that directly dominates, or if it's just a unique shape that doesn't quite have. Oh no, actually, yeah. Hold on. There's another T4 card. This card just has a lot more of everything. Okay, yeah. There's just no way to make this work. Trinkle, yeah. Trinkle also has more stats. All right. Yeah, this one. Okay, yeah. This one's probably. It's actually probably even F- then, because it's going to be behind 40s. So, all right. Abernathy. Ted Abernathy. All right, so this is a unique shape. You've got quite a lot of everything else for iron, and you've just got this 22 control. Unfortunately, the 22 control really is just going to kill the card in pretty much every format. There's just too much of a punishment for having this low control. And so I don't think there's going to be a way to make this one work. The other thing to consider is that as a combinator, you do get a little bit more of a bonus. In other words, the control flattens a little bit, but the problem is you're still only getting him up to like 28 versus lefties, 31 versus righties. He's just going to get smashed. I like the idea of releasing a card like Abernathy better, because it's not exactly understated, right? Abernathy's a better version of previous cards of that shape, so it's an interesting card to consider, but there's not really a way to make it work. And yeah, it's not going to be helped out earlier. All right, how about Juan Beniquez? All right, so 3-position outfielder. I think really this is a center fielder. So you're unlikely to end up paying 8 points in a cap for a card like this, even with the defensive value at 3 positions. So I think it's more a card that you would be thinking about as a starter in low iron or even an iron cap or something like that. And that means that even though you've got these 3 good positions, really the value here is this is a center fielder with 102 range, 102 arm, and a decent enough bat. So this looks like it should be a fairly strong one, at least by eye. Let's see. Yeah, and the model kind of agrees. So it is kind of a lopsided card. I have this card as, even a couple wins behind some of the competitors with the bat, but then more than making up for them with the glove. Because there just really isn't kind of a comparable center fielder. I mean, the closest comparison is probably still the live Brett Phillips. Why is that not? Oh, because I'm on the Combinator card shop. Yeah, so probably the live Brett Phillips is the closest comparison, but this is a better glove and really a better bat. So you're getting quite a lot for those 2 points. So I think Benitez is a card that you really want somewhere at a minimum in your low iron builds. Let me see. He might actually play iron, because now the fact that he's not splitty, because you're going to run a card like Pettis, but Pettis is a little bit splitty. Pettis also, probably there's going to be a little bit more of a bias toward these early eras. So yeah, I wonder if he plays up. Actually, let me take a look. Seems possible. The other nice thing about it is, as a combinator, you are going to get even more defensive value. So if you invest in a combinator version of this card, I'm trying to think if I'm ever really going to pay 8 points in a cap, but I'd at least have to start to think about it if I'm getting that much defensive value at 3 positions. I think I might be more interested in even like a card like Ichiro still, because probably having the extra relief arm is more valuable in these caps. But I'm not sure. Like, it's close. Okay, yeah, and I do, kind of as I was suggesting, I do actually want to play this card just in open iron as well versus righties. Versus lefties, it's definitely Pettis. But modern, I think I want to play this card versus righties. So yeah, the card actually plays up as well. And he's got 3 positions. So I think this is probably an S. Is it even an S+? Let's see. So it is going to play up. How critical is the card? How critical is Benitez? Well, let's see. No, I think the bat's just a little bit too much of a problem, because you're always, really kind of going to have to hide him in your lineup. So that even though he probably plays up, and, it's iron. So every card in iron, the reason they're iron is usually that they have a significant flaw. But even if this card plays up a bit, I think, yeah, I think it's probably just an S then. But it's definitely a solid card. This is one that probably should be in a bunch of your iron builds. All right, and then we got Frank Duffy. Low iron eligible. You do have this 97 range, so there's very much a real glove there. The bat is a complete disaster. So I guess one way to think about it is, how do you want to think about a card like this versus Iglesias, where this version only has 87 range? Which actually, I think you could have justified quite a bit more range on this card, just in terms of thinking about the player. But so you're getting more defense than Iglesias. Iglesias is always winning VL because this bat's enormous for iron. Kiev or Neil at center. Let me see where I've got them. Yeah, I'll put the cards up. I do have them. I do have them a bit lower. And here, so here's Marty. So I think, the bat's fine. The issue is you're going all the way down to 70 range. So I think even though Marty's listed as a center fielder, really he's not a center fielder defensively. I think that's going to be the issue. And as for Neil, Neil VR definitely should be competitive. The thing is, the bat's probably in at least a similar range, but this is those 7 points of range are actually going to be worth quite a bit. Like a rough way to think about range is 1 point of range if you play a full season is approximately in tournament play one extra ball that you get to in the outfield. That's a really sloppy way of looking at it, but it's not a bad heuristic. So that means you're going to basically get 7 extra balls that Benitez is going to catch instead of Greasy Neal. And the thing about center field is that like an extra ball that gets through the infield is typically a single. An extra ball that gets through the center fielder that drops is almost always an extra base hit. So you're really thinking about it as cutting off doubles and triples, which means you're looking at probably 7 runs or something a season defensively, or like 0.7 WAR. So it's not a tiny defensive difference, even though you're getting that 95 range out of Neal. And so that's why I do have Benitez ahead. Now, if you've already invested in a combinator version of Neal, I have Benitez half to 3/4 of a win ahead or something like that. So if you've already invested in the combinator version of Greasy, then you might skip Benitez and kind of wait to upgrade until a bigger jump comes out. But I do have Benitez ahead. All right. Anyway, we were looking at Frank Duffy, right? Yeah, so I think the problem with Duffy is that this Duffy, at least versus lefties, which is probably a slightly better side, you're not getting enough over Iglesias for that to really be worth it, because Iglesias' bat is just so good. And even versus righties, this is just not a very good bat. So I think it's going to make more sense to just run one of the previous shortstops. So even Iglesias, like his bat's not as bad versus righties. I've got Iglesias and Duffy, pretty comparable. But then Iglesias is much better versus lefties. And of course, in full iron, in a non-combinator version, we have the Peck and Paw that came out in the Mission recently. That's going to jump ahead of all of them. Yeah, so I think Duffy probably just is behind Iglesias. Maybe he's your backup shortstop, but probably you should just skip this one. So, all right, Mike Tyson. So many puns that I want to get in here, but maybe we should look at the card first, right? So, and okay, I'll at least get one pun in, which is with all the avoid Ks, it's tough to punch this guy out. All right, but really the big thing is here. So now we're up to 107 range. So this is another not wonderful bat, but you are getting an excellent defensive card now. So still, a non-combinator version, you're still always going to just run Peck and Paw over him at short. So, maybe in some ways this is more of a second baseman. And even there are several very good defensive second basemen that also have a lot more of a bat. So Rivas has more of a bat, Lavulo has more of a bat, and is even low iron eligible. Punto has more of a bat, VL, and then VR, it's really maybe just, well, there are a lot of big bats. There's Alomar, Elberfeld, and so forth. So it really comes down to how much you value the glove. And this is one of these things where the defensive stats in game just have enough issues that it's always going to be a little bit difficult to figure out how to value a glove first middle infielder like this, compared with some of the bat first ones, because the shapes are very different and you just don't quite trust the in-game stats. So with the model that I've got, I end up having Tyson as the second best second baseman versus right, but really in a cluster of about 5 similar cards. And then sort of fourth best VL, but really it's Rivas and then a little gap, and he's again in a cluster of like 4 similar cards. So given that he also plays short, it's definitely reasonable to have this card on your roster. He's going to be free if we go back to having a high iron floor cap or something like that in the next update. But then also, I think there's a pretty good chance that my model's wrong on defense in some direction. If I knew which direction, of course, I would just adjust the model, right? So I'm not going to strongly say I know which direction. This is my best estimate for what defense is doing. But it's just so difficult, given that you're kind of trying to work out your own version of what's happening without trusting the stats, that there's a pretty good chance that if I've got Tyson as comparable to all of these others, he's either a must-play card or an unplayable card. And I'm just not really sure which. And the in-game stats like WAR, if you just collect stats and ask how he does, it's not clear you're really going to get a good answer from it. So given that, maybe let's just give him like a C. I think there's a good chance that there are places you want to use the card. I think it's possible that this is actually a must-play card. And I think it's possible that, yeah. All right, let's go on to John Briggs. See, I thought this was going to be the quick stream without a co-host. All right, I'll see if I can speed it up a little bit then. So John Briggs, so we are up to bronze already. So let's see what we got here. So that's a lot of eyes, so I'm always going to immediately look at that and kind of like the bat. On the other hand, we've had a lot of cards that have pretty good bats released in bronze outfield recently. So there was a while that left field was really just a difficult position to fill, and this would have hit like a significant hole in the meta. But now it's not clear that that's true anymore. We've had... Even in low bronze, we've had Bill Bean, for example, that's going to have a much bigger bat and full. Jock Jones. We had the Otis Nixon, who's eligible for low bronze. Kelly Johnson has a bigger bat. Billy Hamilton has a bigger bat. So yeah, it looks to me like this card just is going to get swamped probably in terms of these other bats. And then this is not a good defensive outfielder, whereas a couple of the ones I mentioned are. So he needs a really good bat to play. In an earlier era, his bat, improves a little bit, but then also the defense becomes a bit more important. And a card like Coleman probably also. Yeah, all right. So this one probably doesn't play. I don't think it's an F-. There is something to the bat for low bronze, but I don't think it's something to look at much. All right, and then we've got Menke. So see, this is a really good indication of power creep, right? This is the gold Menke from much earlier in the cycle, and not that much earlier, right? This is this July. Looks like it's from July actually, based on the mission. And then here is the version of the card in September. So the power creep is quite rapid here. Now we're getting a pretty good bat. So, by eye, this looks like a pretty interesting card. The problem is it actually just ends up again getting dominated. So for example, this VL bat, as good as it is, you're only getting 80 range in the infield, and I think actually if you were to run this as a platoon option, you might just play Iglesias still. And then VR, where the card's not as strong, again, you're only getting 80 range, and we've had some excellent cards released recently in middle infield and bronze. So, Tommy Butts probably just does more of everything and has 102 range, for example. So I think Menke's just understated compared with those. He certainly would play an iron. It's not an F minus, but I don't think it's a card to get that interested in. And then we've got Rico Carty. Well, that is a huge bat VL. He is a DH. So, yeah, I mean, but actually, I guess defensively you could even stick him at first. So I think this is actually a pretty easy one to value. Basically, for a long time, the best base card was the Jeff Bagwell. What was the Jeff Bagwell that we had? Why can't I type? But the Bagwell we had as a PTCS reward. This was our best sort of VL bat in bronze. Rico is even a low bronze. And Rico is significantly better than Bagwell now. And yes, there's been some power creep, but even so, Rico is just significantly better than Bagwell VL. And like Bagwell, you really never want to let him face a righty. Bagwell's less disastrous. Rico really, cannot face a righty. You at least get a little bit of power, I guess. So, but it's basically going to be a zero bat VR. So I think the way to think about this is in any build where you were running a card like Bagwell before, you should just automatically upgrade to Rico. And, of course, Rico is Combinator eligible, so you can get an even bigger bat VL if you bring this card to a level 5 Combinator. It's not quite as good as sort of being all blue makes it look. I think this is one where the coloring does kind of bias it a little bit. But even so, this is a huge bat VL. Certainly much, much more than anything we're looking at something like a bronze bat. You're probably playing that bat at level 5, at least in gold VL. Maybe even a little bit higher. However, right now, bronze is very right-handed. You're not going to have a lot of options to play a card that only plays versus lefties. So for the moment, he's actually probably more useful even in things in a little bit earlier eras, just because they're places that you can get one extra bat on the roster. So that makes it tricky. This is, in terms of just VL bats, this is absolutely an S+. This is a card that's playing up at least into gold at level 5, maybe even higher in some cases. But in the current meta, it's really tricky to figure out how to use him. I think that makes it kind of a fun card to make decisions on. So I kind of like having cards like this that really make you think about roster construction. Overall, I think the other thing to consider is this is a card that probably has a fair bit of shelf life, given how overpowered it is in the thing it's good at. So I think for that reason, I think we should give this an S+. Because there's likely to be a point in the next month or two that bronze does become more left-handed, or even that low silver becomes very left-handed, and suddenly this becomes an essential card. So I think it's kind of a rare situation where it actually should be an S+, even though it's a card that only has some pretty specific use cases. All right, and then we got Winnegar. So we had a silver Winnegar that really didn't end up playing much this cycle. And this card, again, has the same shape and just a lot more of everything. So the fact he's got a lot more of everything, is certainly going to help quite a bit. So I have this as the second best catcher VR behind Gruby, and then the second best VL behind Benedict. And then very slightly sort of the best two-way option. So I think basically this is just kind of a reasonably powered card. You could still play your other platoons. There are several catchers now that are comparable. If you've invested in Gruby, you don't have to invest in Winnegar, and Gruby's 5 points cheaper. but this is probably like a solid B or C. It's certainly a card that you're happy to start playing in bronze. And if you haven't invested in the combinators of any of the other cards I'm talking about, this is a reasonable one to pick instead, I think. And this probably now completely kills a card like Fleetwalker, I guess. There probably is too many things ahead of it. All right, and then we got Mike Paul. Let's see. Well, this card has its points in the right place, so that's already a really good sign. Yeah, and I guess the funny thing is, even though the points are in the right place, I guess we've had enough. Yeah, this isn't as high as I thought, because I guess we've just had enough power creep in bronze that there are cards that do similar things, but more of them. So, for example, as a base version, let me go back to the base. As a base version, this Reggie Cleveland probably just has more of everything. Yeah, maybe a card like Lieber is still even just doing more of things like this. Okay, yeah, but by eye, I thought he'd be pretty playable, but yeah, he ends up actually just too far down the list and being a bit understated. Okay, that's a surprise. All right, and then we've got Steve Renko. Well, I think this is a card that has a lot more points, but the problem is they've all gone into the P. Babbitt. So as a result, this ends up just quite far down the list. I would think. Well, hold on. Now that I'm actually running it, I think I misjudged this one by eye. Actually, there do seem to be enough points here that when I run it, it does end up quite a bit higher on the list than I thought. Huh. Okay. So let's try that again. There's a lot of points on this card. So yeah, you got to be able to just forget everything I just said. But now I'm telling you the truth. No, actually, my model does think that there are enough points on this card to be pretty close. So I don't quite have him as a top 5 starter base, but the thing about a card like this is because it's flat, as a combinator, he is actually picking up, sort of a little bit of everything. And this can be more effective than some of the less balanced cards, where they're not getting as much improvement in specific flaws or something like that. So actually, as a level 5 combinator, I do have him kind of sneaking into the back end of the rotation. He's still not going to be a must-have card. It is sort of like sneaking into the back end of the rotation rather than best card in bronze or anything like that. But I think there probably is actually some room for this. So I think probably it's more like a D. But you probably do need the combinator version to really get interested. All right, and then finally we've got this Reggie Cleveland that I just mentioned, where there is no combinator version available. So this card I do have as kind of number 2 behind Baker at base, and neither of them is combinator eligible. So for base, this is a strong card, and probably a pretty important LE to have if you're kind of playing all of these formats. He is going to still get drowned out by all the combinators. Baker is so far ahead that he can compete with the combinators. It's now Baker, still an enormous gap, and then this is right at the top of kind of the next tier. But everybody else in that next tier is combinator eligible. So I guess it's no longer an F because there are combinator heavy Yeah, because there are things with combo caps where he'll play. So probably it's more like a D minus, but you still would rather invest in the combinator versions of things if possible. All right, and then we got Jim Barr. Huh. All right. Well, this one. Okay. Well, I'll check. I'll check the model before I say it too strongly. But my guess is this is one that my model is going to like a lot more than. Well, since I don't have a co-host, I was going to say whoever my co-host model is. I think my model is going to like this a lot more than their model. Basically, because I'm anticipating that this is going to see a lot of lefties. And in particular, this is an interesting card to run out of the pen because even though he's not going to get much of a stuff boost, reducing to 2 pitches, if you run this card in a high leverage situation, people are going to pinch hit lefties against him because that's what the AI manager does. And you're going to get a chance to really get this card to face a ton of lefties. So... yeah, and that is kind of what I'm seeing here. So, it still is the case that at base version, he's just too far behind the other starters to really think of as a starter. And you need really sort of exactly the right use case for all of this to make sense. But yeah, having said that, I do think there's actually a case to play this card, especially as a high leverage bullpen option, just because you're going to get people to do the wrong thing against them, and there's no really good way to tell the AI manager, don't pinch hit a lefty against somebody with these kind of splits. So I think that means he's not the F that he otherwise would be, at least in my model. I think this is more like a D, but I do think if I had a co-host, they would be strongly telling me this is an F minus. All right, and then we got Nate. I'm guessing Colbert. I'm gonna guess Colbert. So. Well, that's a pretty big bat versus lefties. It's not as big of a bat as the Rico Cardi we just saw, but certainly a real bat versus lefties. I think the problem is that it is behind sort of a Rico Cardi and so forth, and that's just going to end up killing it. But also, there's another card we're going to talk about in a moment that also is a significantly better bat VL. And that's going to end up swamping him. So yeah, this is just going to be unplayable. But now let's look at George Scott, because Scott is the one. Scott is the one that probably is going to be the better option. He can play first, he can play third. He's a bigger bat VL by quite a bit, and you can still play him versus righties as well if you have to. And he can play the field, right? Because this is. For example, Rico Cardi still is a much bigger bat than this if you just stick him at first. But Scott is giving you some defensive value, which you're not getting from Cardi. And the fact that Scott can play 2 positions, makes it a lot easier for roster construction. I still don't have him as the best option at any of those positions. So maybe at first base. Maybe that makes... yeah, maybe you do run him at first base if you have a high-level combinator version, just because at that point the bat has become sort of just barely big enough to make it work. Yeah, okay, so I guess, again, probably... yeah, probably there's some tiny sliver of a use case. So maybe it's like an F+. Definitely not a card I'm rushing out to get. But I do think you can kind of squeeze out a use case if you're pushing hard for one. All right, and then we got Matlack. All right, so you're getting a lot of control. You're getting a lefty who isn't actually very splitty, which is certainly useful. So at base, though, I still have this a little bit too far behind. So at base, I have this as about the 10th best starter, even in low silver. Now, six of the cards ahead of him actually are not combinator eligible. So at level 5, I do have this card as sneaking into the 5th spot in rotation, potentially, only in low silver. It is a very narrow use case. I think probably the right advice is to just skip it and give it an F. But it's at least sort of a fringy F. All right, and then we got Lyman Bostock. So we are up to full silver. Okay, and this is a one-way bat, but now it's the strong side of the platoon, which is, certainly then going to be quite a bit more useful. So, question is it a big enough bat? Because there are now a handful of pretty good VR bats in silver, and this is a really lousy defensive card. I know he's listed at center, for example. You could stick him in left, but you definitely can't stick him in center. You really don't want to stick him in right. I mean, I guess with the arm, that maybe is the least bad place to stick him, even. But yeah, it's gonna be tough to find any of those for him. And then yeah, so it really is a question where the bat carries him. I do have this, though, as about tied for the best VR bat in silver. So potentially the bat is good enough to carry him. There's some others, like, there's the Jerry Hairston that still is going to be really good at high level. So probably of the cards we're talking about with these big bats, this is this is maybe the least flexible, but maybe slightly the best shape for being able to move to earlier eras. So yeah, okay, I'm not quite sure what to do with this. So I think definitely it's in the range where there are reasons that you're going to want to have the card. Even a high-level combinator version of this really is not a VL bat. Okay, so maybe just give it about a C. There's definitely a reason to have him, but probably not critical. All right, and then we're up to gold. All right, so at least we're moving a little bit. What have we got left here? Okay, no, we've still got a fair number of cards left. It's a bigger set this week, I guess. So all right, I'll try to speed up a bit. On Fulham. So another of these righties that kind of has this nice reverse split, where maybe he's going to run a little bit better out of the pen for that reason. Otherwise, kind of as a starter, he's just pretty far behind. And even but he is actually, like, with those ratings, this is the top VL option. So the funny thing is, this is actually kind of a lefty specialist potentially, which is kind of funny. And you actually might be able to get somebody to run a lefty specialist here, even as a right-handed option, because you can set that. Yeah, you actually can set that in your depth chart. Okay, so this is probably at least a little bit interesting. Normally the problem with lefty specialists is with the 3-batter minimum, he's just going to face too many pinch hitters. But here, people are actually going to pinch hit lefties against him. So there's a really narrow use case. It's only as a bullpen option. So for sure, it's only as a bullpen option if we're doing this. Yeah. Still probably doesn't make sense. Then I guess as a theme week prize, I guess you're not going to be able to get a combinator version now that I think about it. So yeah, if you can't get a combinator version, this is still an F, but it's at least, sort of an interesting F, right? Okay, and then we've got this LE10 John Montefusco. All right, so I'm not going to get into this whole question of, which players should get cards and stuff. I know that discussion came up this week. I think from my point of view, I'm mainly just thinking about the decision, not as much as who we honor with a card. You're picking players from a baseball database, I guess. I'm thinking about it more as we've released this card as an LE10. What does that mean, and so forth, right? And there, I think we've got some issues. So first off, in general, I don't understand how releasing an LE10 gold can make a lot of sense. If the card's completely useless, it's useless no matter how you release it, and there's no point in releasing an LE that's going to be unplayable. If you release an important card that's a 10-copy LE, you've just sort of priced a lot of people out of gold. And the problem is that this is such a good card VR that there are situations where this becomes potentially a really important card. So it is certainly the case that if he faces enough lefties, this is not a card that you're going to want in the rotation. The problem is there are several things you can do to get him to face righties. If you run openers, so I suspect that this is a card that's going to turn out to be excellent in observed data because people that are investing in the card also understand how to run openers, and they're going to get him to face righties a lot of the time. You're not going to want to pinch hit. You're sort of not going to want to pinch hit righties, very early in, and pinch hit lefties very early in the game. Right? But also, there are scenarios where I think you could construct a PTCS format where this suddenly becomes like one of the most important cards in the format. For example, if we go back and have a tournament in Naven again, this very, very right-handed power park where everyone has to run right-handed sluggers, and you make it a cap format so that you don't really get to run full platoons, this might simply be the dominant card in a gold PTCS. And it's quite possible that a week and a half from now, that's the kind of format we're going to be hearing about. And then you've basically said that only one of the people that have the 10 copies can win the tournament. So I really worry about releasing a card like this in general. I don't understand how that's helping to solve the problem that, people are kind of leaving because they're feeling priced out of things. But as for the card itself, okay, it's not combinator eligible, but it is really, really good VR. At the time of release, it was by far the best VR option in full gold even. Right now, it's still by an enormous amount the best option in low gold. The Steve Rogers we're gonna put up in a moment is now even better VR in full gold. Yeah. So even with no combinator version, I think it depends heavily on the use case. So I'm going to guess that this card does end up having a use case just because that's kind of been the history of cards like this. But it's really tough, and of course, you've got to make the decision right now because if you wait a week and a half, there are only 10 copies. if you wait a week and a half, either you're going to be right or wrong in it for investing in it, but you're not really going to be able to easily change your mind a week and a half from now. So yeah, I think there are just enough places that it's dominant at what it does. Maybe I'll give it like an A question mark. Uh, Probably there should be a question mark in there because we really just don't know what the formats are going to be. I definitely feel like if I'm going to play the PTCS, I need to invest in one. But you know, I might be right or I might be wrong about that. We're going to find out. All right, Cliff Johnson. Exactly, Ryan. It's well, if you're going to qualify, you at least want to take a shot at it. I think that's the point. And it's so tough to tell whether there will be the right format for this or not. But there are two shots. There's three shots. There's a PTCS, there's a PTMS, and then there's the tournament refresh. So, all right, Cliff Johnson. Well, this is again the VL side. Kind of wants to be a first baseman. But we've just got a lot of really good VL bats that clobber this. Like in full gold, you're looking at Jack Clark types. There is again Rico as well. There's the Carlos Quentin that came out recently. So this one's just going to get clobbered. And actually, because it's even behind some of these others, yeah, this is probably even going to be an F- at this point. All right, Eckersley. Mr. Exactly, it's more fun to qualify on lives. Yeah, see, it is more fun to win one. That is certainly true. Hey, drafts are winnable, right? Let's see. All right, Dennis Eckersley. Huh. A Cleveland version of Eckersley. I kind of forgot that part of his career. Quite splitty. And this is also a starter, huh? Okay, so yeah, it looks like the splits are just going to kill him. Yeah, he's just going to be too far behind. Okay, so the splits do end up just killing him. Yeah, he doesn't convert to the pen quite enough. Okay, yeah. All right, the splits just end up killing him. Fine, we can go on to Terry Forster. Well, the ratings points are in the right place, at least. So that's kind of a good start. The thing is that there have been some other cards released recently that just have more of everything. So, like if you compare this card to, say, Jabba looks quite similar, lower PBAB, of course, but then has sort of more of everything else. So I don't think Forster's going to work at all in full gold. He's kind of fringy. He is actually, he has enough points in the right place to be playable in low gold, so we'll give him a D because there's kind of one use case. All right, let's go on to Fregosi. So we got two LEs. They have this nice new page where you can look at the packable LE. It's actually funny that there's this big imbalance because they were released at the same time, and just randomly we've had 42 of the 50 Fregosis, but only 27 of the 100 black ones that happen to have been pulled. So Fregosi, shortstop, you're getting a good shortstop bat. The thing is, they're just huge shortstop bats right now in gold. So, this card actually is behind both the bat and the glove with Ozzy, for example. He is, again, sort of probably the best low gold option at base. And actually, some of the competitors even also don't really have combinators in the same way that this one doesn't. So, yeah, again, I think probably there's one format which is a low gold where he is going to play. So he gets a D, but he's not really going to play too much outside that. So let's see, drafts. Oh, that first pop-up draft. Yeah, we could look at the pop-up drafts. I mean, they were kind of randomish formats, but you know whatever works, right? Um, let's see, Luzinski. Well, this is a much better defensive Luzinski. We had a Luzinski a couple of years ago that I think had like a one range or one arm or some combination like that that really made him essentially the worst defensive player you could construct in perfect team. So this Luzinski at least is not that. There is some semblance of of left field defense here. Um, the bat, though, is the bat's just significantly behind, kind of all of the left field options, isn't it? Yeah, okay, yeah. Actually, the bat's way behind here in full gold. Even in low gold, this isn't going to play, so we'll give him an F minus and move on to Steve Garvey. Oh, see, until I scroll down and look at the eye, I get really excited about the card. And just because of the eye, okay, it's not really an F minus, it's really an F. But on this stream with that eye, we got to give him an F minus. I mean, it is still a Warbot stream, and I don't have a co-host to tell me I can't do it. So, might as well go for it while I can. Speaking of which, if anyone's interested in being a co-host, co-hosts needed. We seem to be going through them like Spinal Tap drummers and all that. So definitely let me know if you're interested. All right, Belanger. This is a really frustrating card for me because you could really credibly make a case, I think, that he's the best defensive shortstop in the history of the game. There are definitely others you could make that case for as well, but this is certainly one of the guys where you could make a case that he's the best defensive shortstop in the history of baseball, and that's definitely not sort of what we're seeing for this card here. Right? This is a good defensive shortstop, but this is not even sort of a good enough defensive shortstop to really have the glove carry him against, because the bat's also sort of worse here. So this is one where I really was hoping maybe to see something significantly stronger than what it seems like we actually ended up getting. Yeah. Okay. Having said that, the card is just way behind some of these other cards we're talking about, like Ozzy, and yeah, even if you imagine, trying to give some kind of bump and really overweight defense, I can't see where this is going to end up really really giving you that much of value, just because at this point in the cycle the bat's so far behind everything else we got. Yeah. Why is this so far behind though? Now that I look at it, nope. Okay, no, I see what it's doing. Yeah, it really is. Okay. All right, let's go on. Roy White. Roy White. So really splitty. Left field, let's see, left field only. So this is probably a big enough bat with the glove to work, right? Okay, yeah. So I've got this as the best VR. Really wants to be platooned with somebody. Maybe like you platoon him with Rondell White or something like that. So really, or Quentin really does need a platoon, but this is a big enough bat that you're happy to play him in left with that glove. So yeah, he's probably like a solid B. He's not, not essential, but is probably going to be a little bit of an upgrade. All right. And then you got Thurman Munson. Yeah, see, all these catchers are getting like 110 framing or something. We've just kind of really been power creeping everything, even for the catchers where maybe defensively it's hard to justify. Okay, well, given where power creep is, this is now going to be, kind of ahead of the Johnny bench that we had before VL. So he is playable. He's probably even going to sneak into your best two-way catcher just because the VL is carrying him, even if you might rather platoon him. So I can't even give him the Yankee F minus, can I? I've got to give him more like a B. But in spirit, this is a Yankee F minus. All right, so Ken Singleton, we had a really good gold Singleton a couple of years ago that was a big DH. This bat, this card also sort of wants to be a DH, but the bat's just not as big, is it? Yeah, this is just like pretty far behind all of the bats we were just talking about. It's kind of missing a rating compared with some of these. It's not missing as much VL, but even VL, it's just going to be hard to figure out. Because you've got some of these big cards like Clark and Evans. You put Evans in right. You could put Rondell White in left, and this is just. Yeah, this is actually quite a bit behind. This is probably an F minus. Actually, it's just way too far behind at this stage in the cycle. All right. Ron Say. Third base only. So this is again something that early in the cycle, this would have been a huge bat and play forever. Here, this is now actually, if anything, a little bit underpowered of a bat. It's behind Spencer Horwitz VR. It's behind, Atkins and Marte VL. So because all of these other third basemen are really splitty, and say this is actually not as splitty of a card as it looks by eye. I think the coloring is a little bit deceptive. Because of that, I do actually have him as the best two-way option. But because he's third base only and there's so many good platoon options, I don't think he's ever going to end up in a build for me. So I'm not going to give him an F. I'm going to give him a D because he is sort of this decent two-way option. But I suspect he's not going to make it onto all that many rosters. All right, and then Boog Powell. Well, he's got big power. He's got big eye VR. But even so even just a power and eye card, this isn't a big jump ahead in the meta, but it is a little bit of a jump ahead. So versus righties, I do actually have this as probably a win and a half above, say, the PTCS Tino Martinez. But then this is also a card that is combinator eligible. And the other funny thing about this is, as much as this VL bat isn't big, by level 5, this is actually going to start to be a much more playable two-way bat. His weak side gets quite a bit better. So I think this probably actually, as a combinator, is potentially a real jump ahead in the meta. So as much as the base version is only a bit ahead, I think this probably ends up actually being an A. And this is kind of an interesting one to take a look at. Yeah, I think this is actually pretty playable. All right. What do we got next here? Davy Lopez. This looks like a really good middle infield bat. Now we have seen there's been a big upgrade in that position. So for example, the problem is that this is going to be competing now with a card like Mark Ellis, where you're getting 109 range, 109 turn double play, but of course it's only second base. And Davy is potentially giving you 3 positions, but only this 91 range. So at least in Modern, I'd expect a card like Ellis to come out pretty substantially ahead. You're just getting quite a bit more. Even sort of as a two-way card, Ellis is probably just starting out a win better, and then they're each gaining something comparable from being combinators. So I think this one probably just doesn't play. You're not going to really run him at short ever, because just there's not enough range compared with the other shortstops that are out there. Okay, yeah. So I think there are a lot of points on this card, but it's actually an F, which is not what I expected by I. All right, and then Mark Littell. Well, you got a lot of points everywhere but control, and kind of as we were discussing with this shape before, there's just no good way to make this shape work right now. I do have him, despite the low control, as being sort of fringy, playable VR out of the pen, but then, yeah, VL, he just gets absolutely clobbered. Now to the pen, he's going to see too many lefties. So I like the idea of having to think about a card like this, but I'm never going to be able to play it with that kind of control, even as a combinator. All right, and then we've got this L.E. Blackman. Where is it? Here it is. So this is listed as a center fielder, but the card really isn't a center fielder. It's I guess, a left fielder. I mean, it really sort of wants to be a DH, and I think that's its undoing, because I do have it at base as like the third or fourth best bat VR. So you could try to stick it in left, but that's even at base, and this card's not combinator eligible. And of course, your AI manager is going to try to play him in center sometimes too. So it's just, yeah, this one's probably just not going to work. All right, we've got Hickman. Okay, we got one more T4 card. So this is kind of a flat-ish bat. So it's a card that will get, a decent-sized combinator boost. This becomes a pretty nice level 5 bat. And it is a little better VL, but it's sort of more of a two-way bat than a lot of the ones that we've been looking at. I do still have it quite a bit behind sort of Jack Clark, to the point that even at level 5, it probably doesn't quite reach Clark. And so I'm not quite sure you end up finding a way to play. It's going to be behind Quentin, it's going to be behind Rico Carty VL, but it's a much, much better two-way bat. Yeah, and then I guess it's going to be. It's probably Quentin and Powell maybe that come together to sort of kill it. Because if you invested in both, you don't want this card. But he probably gives you a third alternative. And because it gives you a third alternative, if you haven't invested in all of those, then this is a reasonable alternative. So probably it's something like a D, but it's definitely not going to be a critical card. All right, Ludwig, yeah, things are going well. Desperately needing a co-host, though. We seem to be driving all our co-hosts out of the game or something. So, help wanted and all that. But, yeah, going well. Hopefully going well with you. Just trying to run through these fairly quickly because without a co-host, there's less discussion because, if we disagree on a card, then there's kind of not much to fix it yet. All right, Steve Rogers, so the rating points are in the right place. The issue is that there isn't a combinator version, so that's going to make it tricky. But I do have this as just significantly the best base gold starter. And I guess the idea is this will eventually be a packable card, right? And when it's a packable card, it will be combinator eligible, if I understand correctly. Because I think that's in some sense going to be the key. If this card were combinator eligible, this is an S plus. As a non-combinator eligible card, you really, really want this card at base. And it's even fringy. Like, you probably do still play the card. But Izadafo, I think, just is not really playing PT at this point, is the problem. So he, I'm semi-playing, but at least kind of keeping track of what's going. I think he's more, really sort of stopped. And Tactile Next, I think, would work well as a co-host, but he's also kind of been busy with other stuff. So, yeah. I think this is still an S plus then, because I think this is a good enough card that you're even playing it at base over a lot of the combinators right now, and then it will eventually be combinator eligible at a point when it's still probably at the top of the meta because of how far ahead it is. All right, good. So we are up to some diamonds. Tommy John. Well, he's got points in the right place. Obviously, the issue with the card is going to be the stuff, right? But he's got points in the right place, and we're now up to low diamond. I should actually try to speed up a bit now that I look at this. Yeah, because we got a late start because I was kind of hoping we'd find a co-host for today. Okay, so I have this card as like third or fourth among starters in low diamond right now, but it's the only one that's currently combinator eligible, right? Because Steve Rogers eventually will be combinator eligible. So because of that, this probably is like about a B. And there's not too much to say about it, right? It's good at the things it does. It won't strike out a lot of hitters. This card will get a little bit better in earlier eras because of the things it does, and that's part of where the strength is coming from. All right, and then we got Gary Maddox. Yeah. Again, sorry, I'm going to try to go through these quickly because I have an early wake up tomorrow, and then I just started too late because I was hoping we'd have somebody join us. All right. Well, for a guy that was supposed to be the Secretary of Defense, I think you can see why he got the 112 range in center. I think it actually needed to be even a little bit more maybe to differentiate him, because we have right now a bunch of center fielders that aren't that far behind. Cleon Jones is up there. Fred Lynn is up there, can play center. Sizemore is actually not that bad. Roy Thomas. And because of that, this card just doesn't beat those out. I think you could have made a card here where you gave him another 5 or so points on defense and suddenly he becomes quite important. But, as this one stands, it's just a little bit understated defensively, and he has to be able to differentiate himself defensively to be able to play. All right, Steve Foucault. Well, it's a righty with weird splits. The problem is just that compared with low diamond relievers at this point, this is understated even, independent of the splits. So even if you made the splits flat, this card's just a bit understated. He's just outside of the top, 8 or so. All right, and then we got Don Baylor. I should put the card up, shouldn't I? We've got Don Baylor. Well, it's a big VL bat, so we've now got a bigger VL bat than Rico Carty, finally. So this is about where that kicks in. So I do have this as the best VL bat in low diamond. VR, the card's not going to be very good. So you're going to have a similar kind of decision as you had with Rico as far as whether this is worth a roster spot. And here there are more lefties. For example, even the Tommy John we just talked about. You'll see some Rube Waddell. So there are just enough lefties that it probably does make sense to, think about putting this card on your roster. There's one other consideration here, which, I don't think we can tell from the card. I think we're going to have to tell from observed data. But remember that there are hidden ratings on a couple of these cards. Don Baylor could have an enormous hidden hit by pitch rating. And if he did, that would actually significantly bump up the value. It's basically like having a bunch of extra points for I. And we're just not going to know the answer to that until we see the observed data. But it's worth somebody maybe checking that in observed data. If this card is getting a lot of free hit by pitches, then it becomes sort of even stronger than we're rating it. I think as we're currently rating it, it's probably about a C. Like there are reasons to have it, but there are costs to kind of putting it on the roster. I don't know. Was there any discussion of that when Spore released the card on stream? I didn't really catch much of the stream, but I know Spore often, thinks about some of this historical stuff. Did he discuss the hit by pitch at all on this card? Okay. Yeah, I didn't catch it either, but it's definitely something that could be out there, is the point. So it's probably worth checking that before really evaluating the card, because the kind of thing, that could just have free. Yeah. Okay. All right, and then we are up to Joe Torre, huh? In full diamond. And so this Torre does not play catcher, is that right? This was a third base only. Okay, no, he does play. No, he does play catcher. So, I see. So his list is a third baseman, but he really doesn't have a position. He's sort of maybe like a bad early era's catcher, and then otherwise just has to be a DH or something. But no, but that's not going to work because the bat's nowhere close. Yeah, I can't play. All right, so the place I have him highest is catcher. I think that is the place that this card is closest, despite being listed at third. Third's probably actually his weakest of the three positions. Even at catcher, he just doesn't really play in Diamond at this point. But the catcher eligibility probably makes him an F instead of an F minus, because he's at least kind of fringy in the catcher. Yeah, Mister, I agree. We should just see all the ratings, and then you could rate the card. But that's not the way it's done. All right, George Foster from his big home run season, I guess. He had 52 or something. So you've got a fair bit of power. But not as much as it really looks. Because the problem is that at this point, Mule Suttles, for example, has the same power, right? So let's say this 153 versus right, 156 versus left or something, right? Mule Suttles has to say the same 156 VL, but a ton more of everything. Or if I look VR, I guess there aren't a lot of comparable power cards VR, but there are cards that certainly are going to play and then have power 110, 120, but then a ton more of everything else. So I think that this just ends up being understated, and it's not quite high enough up on power where the combinator version starts to kind of take it past the cliff where you get a different sort of return. All right, Greg Nettles. So I'm a little bit worried to pull up this card because we have just consistently had unplayable Greg Nettleses for years. But let's take a look. Okay, well, by giving this card a lot of power, there's at least a shot at trying to make him playable. Yeah, actually, there's enough power that we've given this card that this is now, I think this is our first playable Greg Nettles that we've had in the time I've been playing PT. I do have him as the best third base bat VR. And then at the same time, you are getting a pretty good glove. Yeah, okay, this is, it's still a one-way card, but this is probably at least a solid B. But for a Greg Nettles in PT, this is excellent. This is the first time we've kind of hit one that we can use. Yeah, I remember we had like 2 different tournament edition Greg Nettles or something one year that were just both. It was like Frankie Frisch was another one that just somehow we couldn't get to connect with the game engine. All right. Kuzman. Well, so this is one where the color scheme, I think, starts to make it a little bit tough to evaluate the card. You've really got to look at the ratings. It is all blue, but the problem is there are other cards that even if they're not quite all blue because like they're missing a rating, just have a lot more of all of the other relevant ratings, and even as a lefty. So for example, Randy Johnson, or this Randy Johnson, yeah, he's missing the P BABIP, but it's actually a lot more of like all of the key ratings. So Kuzman just ends up a little bit too far outside the meta. So that one's an F. It's not an F minus. It's it's certainly like close to playable, but it's behind the top 10 or so. All right, and then we've got Fidrich. Who sadly does not have what we used to refer to as a bird profile. So yeah, Fidrich is missing stuff and has everything else. But the problem is that in the current version of Diamond, you really can't get away missing that much stuff. So I think Fidrich was intended to be a better card than this, but actually I have him outside the top 5 or so, and then at least currently not combinator eligible. So I think this is going to be an F. All right, and then finally, we are on Clinch Your Diamond. Isn't it a bit early to clinch your Diamond division? Anyway, we are on to the perfects. So I guess we're now starting to think about these a little bit more with the league focus as well. So let's start with J.R. Richard. And this to me was sort of a frustrating card simply because historical accuracy, I do want the cards to reflect sort of history a bit, and I don't think you can justify this kind of control rating for the card. I like the idea of having a J.R. Richard card, but this is a card that sort of like these Nolan Ryans would have been a really nice card earlier in the cycle when it was easier to give out a card missing a rating instead of trying to just pretend that there's a lot more control there. Okay, but we can rate the numbers on the card either way. So I think this is a card where in tournaments this is going to be a pretty useful rotation piece in Modern. In League, the fact that the control is this far down, basically the only other card you're going to see with this level of control in League is a card like Kodai Senga. And as a result, so this probably should not be in your League rotation, but this is a useful tournament piece. So maybe Bridging the Gap will give him about a C. There's definitely a nice use for the card because of the amount of control he's been given. So, all right. And then Tony Oliva. Okay, that's a weird decision because we just had this idea of like we want to find a way to get everyone to play Clemente, and then we're going to release a second right field only option. And we're going to release one that actually probably has more ratings points than Clemente. Yeah, right, because that's going to be the comparison. So you are getting better defense from Roberto Clemente. So again, I think this is going to be one where Oliva probably is the better tournament option. Clemente is probably marginally the better league option, but it's going to depend a little bit on your league and the normalizations. But if you've already invested in Clemente, I don't think you need to buy this card. And you definitely can't get both of them on the roster. So yeah, probably this is like a C or D. Maybe we'll get like a C minus or something. All right. Fergie Jenkins. Well, here you go. Fergie Jenkins is, I am almost certain, the only Hall of Famer who was banned for life from baseball in the middle of his career and then came back and finished his Hall of Fame career. As for the quality of the card, the lack of home run suppression is probably going to kill him in all but, maybe some very specific ballparks. So the 70s are probably pretty good for him in that sense, but even so, yeah, both in league and tournament, this is just going to get clobbered. This is probably an F minus, at least in the sense that he's behind hundreds. I mean, it's unclear, exactly how to deal with this. All right, Bobby Grich. So we could potentially get an excellent defensive Bobby Grich. That looks like what we got. The interesting thing here is that this one has a lot of power, which is a little surprising to me. What did he actually put up in 1973? Now I'm curious. Well, he had 12 home runs, so this amount of power is, I think, again, trying to make a card that isn't historical. Yeah. Okay, well, again, we'll look at what's on the card. And even with that amount of power, this is still going to be a card offensively that's behind, Hornsby, Beckwith, Pop, and so forth on us. But then defensively, he's not really particularly ahead of Pop. So, yeah, you're just going to end up playing Pop VR. And VL, now this is a little more interesting, but LeMahieu is still probably clobbering him. Beckwith maybe is a little bit ahead. Yeah, so I think there is a narrow use case for him, so it's probably like a D, but this is not one I would rush out and get. And then the fact that he's second base only really means that he can't be much of a backup. Yeah, actually, the more I think about it, the fact that he's second base only, no, this card just has to be an F because you can't find a way to build. Yeah, Mr. Odd, exactly. You can't really find a way to build a roster with him. All right, and then we got Bert Blyleven. Now, we have an unsung heroes Bert Blyleven, which is crazy because I think if anything, this is an oversung hero of baseball, right? This is kind of your very marginal Hall of Famer, where any version of a smaller Hall, he wouldn't be. So how do you have an unsung heroes for like a Hall of Famer? Anyway, as for this Hall of Fame card, so yeah, this seems like a card that's just kind of middle of the pack, fifth starter-ish on release if you have everything. So this is, for example, still significantly behind a card like Koufax. But it is going to be up there in the next tier. I have it similar to Rogan and Elmer Smith and Pryor and those kinds of cards in tournaments. Again, the league, it's going to depend league to league on what your normalization looks like. But this is probably a card that will normalize decently in terms of what he has. So, yeah, so probably he's sort of a B or C. Maybe like a C, given that he cost you a couple extra points and caps. All right, and then we got Johnny Bench. So I think now there's a really obvious platoon that you want at catcher. This is now just by far your best VL catcher in open. Cochran is still by far your best VR catcher in open. You just want to platoon the two, and both of them, are sort of splitty, but are good enough on their weaker sides that, it's not a disaster. Given that Bench is, the VL option, so it's sort of the weaker of the two, Bench is probably really more like a B or C. Maybe we'll give him let's say a B minus. But he's a card that should be on the roster. It's just he's the second most important catcher to get. So if you're picking up one catcher, Cochran is going to be much more important than Bench. Also, Cochran's bat in tournaments is almost good enough to DH VR at this point if you have to. Bench's bat VL is still significantly behind, cards like Greenberg, Miggy, in some scenarios even LeMahieu. All right, and then finally, we got Vita Blue. And I think the comparison here is to put this one up against Koufax. And, okay, well, they're both blue everywhere. Vita is, of course, blue. But Vita's just got a tiny bit more. Plus, he's got these slight reverse splits. So, this really is a card that is up there with Koufax for potentially best starter in the game. It's interesting now that they're both lefties also, and so at the as more of these start to come into play, that might be another reason that Bench starts to become a little bit more important. I still think Cochran's the more important of the two in the long run, but Bench becomes a little more relevant. But in any event, this is just an S plus card. This is basically a second copy of Koufax with reverse splits and a little bit less stamina. Let's see. All right, so we got through the cards. I do want to wrap up pretty soon because, like I said, I have an early wake up. But as always, we should make sure to go ahead and do a TWIP draft. So, let's see if we can. Oh, we have a few drafts. All right, we can do a few drafts if we do them quickly. But let's start by doing our TWIP draft. As always, see if we can get a bad one out of the way. I think Fidrich is the diamond reward, and then Vita's the perfect league reward. I think. I'm not sure. All right, here we go. Our usual bad TWIP draft. One of these times we're gonna, actually just get some good options here. Well, all right, we're not off to a great start, so I guess it's Dickey and Posey, and they at least naturally platoon at catcher. I mean, it's also tough in these sort of positional things where they make you take two catchers here, because they're then actually going to offer us two catchers later, but we're sort of almost never taking a third catcher. Yeah, it's probably Dickey instead of, yeah. All right, it's probably something like this. Wow. Well, it's supposed to be a perfecto. We're not taking Freeman, so I guess it's Norm Cash, and let's hope we only face righties. Okay, Geringer's fine. I mean, we could have taken Jackie, but yeah, all right. And then another one where we're not getting any of the perfects. So probably it's Bando, I guess, in this park. It's all right. We're used to these by now, right? All right, here we go. All right, Pop Lloyd. We actually have a good option at short. That's easy. Um, 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 okay. Billy Williams is probably the pick here. Wow. Yeah, okay, that's a rough round. This is also a rough round. I mean, it's got to be Trout because the others are that much older. But again, not a great round. Huh. I mean, I guess it's Pete Rose, but we really do this every week. It's tradition at this point, right? All right. Well, let's throw some backups in. Carter's fine. Yeah. I mean, unless we actually want to start Andrew Jones in center, probably Carter's more flexible. Wow. And then this is our 5 starters, and we didn't even get offered 5 perfects. Okay. Okay. Well, this spawn is like a release card that's awful. This is an early card that was also kind of awful. Okay, so, so we have Orion, it's Burley, it's Hubble. It's I think it's CC and Musina. Yeah, okay. This is rough even by our usual standards. Um, all right. Java's reasonably recent. It's fine. Hurt is not good, but probably. And we've got to take 5 of these, huh? And there are a lot that just can't be picked at all. Maybe the live braziers? Okay, probably it's Alexander. And Brazier? I don't know that it matters that much at this point, the way the draft's gone, but you know. All right. Well, there's not much here either, is there? Okay. I think we want Shang because I think we might be platooning Cash and Posey at first. Yeah, it just doesn't matter in the end. Oh, we need 3 of these. We had 3 of these. Okay, well then, sure. And then we need 3 hitters here. So, all right, Stewart's useful. It doesn't matter that much, does it? All right. Well, all right. I think we had our usual TWIP draft disaster, as is traditional on the stream. So good to know some things do not change. Probably not worth doing too much to this roster. Let's just let the AI manager see what it can do with this mess. All right, so we can go raid into. Let's go find someone to raid into, or we usually do one good draft after this, right? Just to. So here, let's do one. Let's do one good one. We'll do a like a daily overnight, something like that. And the rocking chair, by the way, that we started still is not filled, so it's still in Quicks. If anyone wants to jump into one in Quicks. All right, 1989, a little bit home run heavy park, fairly flat. All right, why don't we just click? We'll just click through. LeMahieu's kind of going to be pretty good in that format. Yeah, they're all bad, but Piazza's probably closest. All right, Tomi's fine. We got here probably. Yeah, it's probably still Mall and McCormick for this era, right? I mean, or do we? Well. Nah, let's run Luzinski. We'll try to make it work. It is a homer heavy park. All right. Burley's pretty easy. It's all right. It's homer heavy. If we just embrace that, we'll go Kingman. Why not? All right. Floyd's a bat. Quentin's a real bat. I mean, it's mostly just take what you're given in these, right? Duncan's fine. Nothing else is great here, but Rocchio's, going to be playable. Let's see. All right, Devannon, I guess, is a 5th outfielder. Actually, is going to see some playing time. Carr's probably fine for the era. We'd love to get 2 more starters here if we could find them. We didn't, but Velarde's great. Warner's great also if we had somewhere to run him. Yeah, I think just take the good card and we'll figure it out because Duncan has some positional flexibility. Well, Shock would have been. We can't really justify taking a 4th starter probably. So I guess we'll actually pass up on Camille because the idea is LeMahieu's probably playing first here. Okay, well, Connie. Okay, so we get yet another catcher in Connie Day. Yeah, we don't have any second card that should be on the roster here, except that this would be only our 5th pitcher, and so we actually kind of have to take pitchers here just to count pitchers in 1989. So I think we're pretty much stuck taking pitchers, even if we haven't found, any of the things that we were hoping to there, because we want to at least get to probably 11, and that's going to be tricky depending on what we get here, right? I guess we did. We did okay for iron pitchers, so this could have been a lot worse, right? But even so, like we're never taking Stanhouse, we're never taking Sawamura. So we kind of got fortunate to still be able to find, even the number we did. And I guess it's Martin, yeah, which is fine because we have Blauser and Velarde play a bunch of positions. So, all right, there we go. We did a more playable draft. Who should we raid into? Is there anyone still streaming out of the park at this point? Not a lot of people are streaming out of the park. Okay, Ezra Denny's actually going, it looks like, right? All right. So I think we made it. Yeah, thanks everyone. I'll try to figure out a better way to get the timing down. I can see this timing doesn't work as well for people. So, I'll kind of try to think about if there's, better timing we can come up with in the future for these. But all right, say hi to Ezra, and yeah, see y'all next week.